give everybody a chance to join. All right, I think we can start this session, and I welcome all of the authors, or the speakers. Actually, it's not all of the authors, but the speakers of the session, which is dedicated to 3D manipulation, which I think it's a really incredibly important topic for virtual reality and augmented reality as well, because we probably need to transfer the content creation pipeline also inside of the medium of virtual reality and augmented reality. So there are some really great approaches here which we can take a look at and discuss today. And yeah, without further ado, we have our first presentation. Oh, what's going on now? First presentation by Julian Wolf from ETH Zurich, who is talking about gaze and hand actions. And I guess you are ready to go, and we are excited to see what you're doing.
Thank you, Hartmut. Let me just try to share my screen. So you should be seeing the presentation now, right?
Yep.
And
Perfect.
You can also hear me. Perfect.
Yes. Everything
okay.
good.
Thank you, Hartmut, and welcome. My name is Julian Wolf. This work was co-authored by Quentin Lohmeyer, Christian Holz, and Mirko Mebold from ETH Zurich. And augmented reality head-mounted displays are really promising for a variety of manual procedural tasks, such as assembly, maintenance, or surgery. And these tasks are characterized by the operators perceiving information through their eyes and then executing the task with their hands by manipulation in the physical environment. And human error in such applications can be associated with high risk and cost. So we ask ourselves the question, is it possible to predict such erroneous hand actions or mistakes before they're executed? And if we look at such a hand action or hand interaction with a 3D object, a physical 3D object, it starts with the hand reaching to the target, grasping it, and then there's some kind of manipulation. And the goal of our work was to predict and prevent such erroneous hand actions already during target selection, so before the manipulation starts. And if we look on previous research on such context-aware support in augmented reality, this has been done by an evaluation of camera footage. For example, the work by Henderson and Feiner or by Peterson and Stricker. And these systems could already provide feedback during the manipulation and after the manipulation, but not yet before the manipulation starts. And now with recent head-mounted displays like the Microsoft HoloLens 2, there's now also eye tracking and hand tracking integrated. And these are two powerful representations of human behavior. Eye tracking has been extensively used in research to understand perception and to get insights into cognitive processes. Hand tracking, or in general hand poses, can be used for hand activity recognition to understand what the operator has been doing in the physical environment. And we are in particular interested in the task-dependent relationship of these two, namely hand-eye coordination, because in this coordination task, the eyes often precede the hand movement, and therefore this pattern might be usable to predict erroneous hand actions. And something similar has already been done in virtual reality. So Cheng and colleagues displayed several virtual objects to their participants, and they then tracked on which object the participant was looking. And once they started moving their hand, they would confirm this prediction. And if you want to transfer this now to a real-world application, there are several limitations we have to overcome. So first of all, in their study, participants were told which target to aim for, and they didn't make their own decisions. The hand movements were rather slow, and there was, of course, also no physical object manipulation. And according to Crawford and colleagues, especially this part of reaching for and picking up a physical object needs precise coordination. And this affects the time the gaze must arrive on the target. So this directly affects our hand-eye coordination pattern. And to test this now for the first time in a real-world application, we came up with a demonstrator setup. So what you see here is a memory card game. It has several advantages. It is very fast. It's a repetitive procedure. It has a high frequency of target selections, and participants can make any choice on the fly. And the rules of the game are straightforward. In this case, we had 36 cards facing downwards, and there's always 18 matching card pairs. And during a player's move, the player has to turn around two cards, and if it's a matching card pair, these cards are removed from the game and the player scores a point. If they do not match, the opponent's move starts and these cards are turned face down again. And here on the right-hand side, I would just like to show you how this looks in our setup. So the participant just found a matching card pair and can go for another round. And this was not a matching card pair, so the opponent's move now starts. And we developed a setup with a grid printed on a paper sheet where we place our physical game cards. We developed an application for Microsoft HoloLens 2 with Unity and a mixed reality toolkit. And here on the left-hand side, you see we have two Fourier markers printed on the playing field for calibration. And we were interested in measuring the gaze target, so on which physical card the participants were currently looking at, the 3D fingertip position, because the fingertip is involved in turning around the cards, and the 3D hand velocity. And to get these measurements in an automated way in the registered physical environment, we overlay a virtual playing field that has the same dimensions in the horizontal plane than the physical one. And this flat layer you see here is our gaze layer. So here we measure gaze in direction. And we have the second layer, we call it fingertip proximity layer. And this is basically one bounding box placed over each card location. And here we can track whenever the fingertip is within these bounds. And later we will use this to detect the first card turn. And just to note, this playing field, once it's placed, we actually fade it out so we can register these measurements, but it's not visible to the user. We performed the first study with 10 participants where we only recorded data. We did not display any information. And the goal was to derive a logic for this predictive support. And we found during a gaze analysis in post-processing that in 73% of cases, the gaze already arrived on the target card 350 milliseconds before the hands. And the closer the hand now reaches to this card, this percentage steadily increases. The challenge now is basically on whatever card the participant is currently looking, this is also our current gaze prediction. So we need some kind of trigger condition to know when the participant has actually made a choice. And for this, we also investigated the hand velocity curve. So what you see here is the hand velocity magnitude over time. And this first part of the curve is the hand reaching to the target and grasping it. And then we have the card turn. And we defined three characteristic features: the beginning, the peak velocity, and the end of such a hand reach. And we found that the occurrence of this feature B is on average very close to the time the gaze arrives on the target. So the current gaze target plus this feature should allow for a good prediction. Finally, we also want to exclude targets that are too far away from the current hand movement. So for each time step, we calculate the perpendicular distances from each card location to the trajectory. We apply some thresholds and then exclude all cards that are too far away from the trajectory. And with this, we could reduce the 36 possible cards to an average of 3 cards per time step. We then implemented this whole logic for real-time user support. And our support displays different visual alerts. So how it works, the participant can first turn around the first card. And as you saw earlier, we have these bounding boxes. And we can now register whenever the fingertip is within these bounds. And if this exceeds the threshold, we know the first card has been turned around, and we confirm this with green dashed lines. Then our system tries to predict the second card and compares this prediction to a reference layout. And we then display 3 different visual alerts. It's a green bounding box if it's the correct card. If it's not the correct card, but the correct card is just adjacent to this one, it's a yellow visual alert. And if it's neither this card nor one of the surrounding cards, then it's a red visual alert. And with this, I would like to show you a demonstration of our whole setup. So the participant first confirms 2 Fourier marker positions for calibration. Please note this offset is only visible in this video recording and not visible to the participant. and the playing field is faded out. And now for the real-time user support, this is the first card detection and a yellow visual alert, directly resulting in the correct card choice. And so we instructed our participants whenever there was a yellow or red warning in advance, that they should go for a different card to really benefit from the system. And finally, a green bounding box for confirmation. We conducted a second user study with 12 participants in a single player game, and we found that actually 2/3 of our participants, they found a good pace from the start where they could play the game at a normal pace, and these visual alerts would work very robustly with accuracies up to 97% in some cases. The other third of the participants did some arbitrary hand movements at the beginning to test the system, and they then learned how the system worked. And this group of participants then actively used hand-eye coordination to control the system. So they would look on the card, they would have a fast and short pointing gesture in this direction, and therefore they would actively trigger the visual alert. All participants rated the system very positively. They said it was supportive, well-working, and stimulating, and none of the participants felt patronized or monitored by the system. Overall, we achieved an 86% accuracy for correctly placed and timed visual alerts. And we think there's still a little bit of room of improvement, for example, by customizing parameters for individual participants. However, such a system based on thresholds that we used, it has some limitations. So we think to further improve this at some point, it will be interesting to also jointly learn hand and gaze features from data. To wrap up this whole presentation, what we saw is that by placing invisible virtual objects in the physical environment, we can automate behavior analysis in real-world settings. And we think for behavior research, this is already a game changer. And then if you remember the initial question that we asked, if it's possible to predict such erroneous hand actions, we can answer this with a clear yes. Hand-eye coordination has been shown to be very much suitable for such predictive AR support. Of course, there are several limitations to our study, like the simplified setup we used, or we only had 22 participants, and also the sensor accuracy, especially of the eye tracking sensors of HoloLens 2, which was also the reason why we chose these playing field dimensions a bit bigger. However, we could show that the system already works very robustly with a sufficient prediction time. And most importantly, our results match very well with previous research on hand-eye coordination in real-world settings. So we think the essence of our method, of our findings, is transferable to other real-world applications. We're convinced that eye and hand tracking features can greatly boost future context-aware AR systems, and we hope to see a lot of interesting work there over the next years. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward for your questions.
Yeah, thank you, Julian, for your presentation. So, are there any comments in the audience? Not yet. Julian, I have a question, and particularly about this prediction mechanism, or this kind of did you find any like we have all these models in HCI where we can kind of already model certain movements, and did you already find something that you can actually confirm some of the models existing?
So with this work, I mean, it was really like a proof of concept in a demonstrator case, right? So we didn't check for this yet, but to cross evaluate this would be very interesting for next step. But we haven't done this so far.
All right, great. Now, anybody else wants to ask something? Not yet. No. Maybe at the end we can also have a little bit of discussion.
Sure.
Right. So I think we can swap over to our next. First of all, thank you, Julian, for your presentation, and Our next speaker is Muad Al-Kalbani, and from Birmingham City University, and also GlaxoSmithKline. And I guess you could already head over to get your presentation running. And we will hear about drop shadows. Everybody loves drop shadows, and you try to look at what actually can they be useful for. Great stuff. We're looking forward.
Can you hear me fine?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hartmut. Hello, everyone. So my name is Muad Al-Kalbani, and today I'm going to be presenting our paper, Evaluation of Drop Shadows for Virtual Object Grasping in Augmented Reality. So just a little bit of background around myself. I'm a newly appointed research fellow in human computer interaction at the Digital Media Technology Lab in Birmingham City University in the UK. Prior to my role, until very recently, I was the augmented reality technical specialist at GlaxoSmithKline, the pharmaceuticals company here in London. And before that, a research fellow at Aston Business School. So during my time at GSK, this was a 2-year partnership between GSK and Birmingham City University to optimize the use of augmented reality for GSK consumer healthcare specifically. So my role was essentially around advising the business on how best to develop augmented reality applications and how best to measure the impact of those augmented reality applications as well, and help develop some of the tools that are currently in use for GSK consumer healthcare that will help kind of speed up the adoption of augmented reality across the company, and also help increase the level of knowledge that the leadership teams have around augmented reality and how best to make use of it as a business solution and a kind of a technology solution for their business teams and sales teams as well. Before my time at GSK, I was a research fellow at Aston Business School. So this project was quite different to my role at GSK. It was mainly focused on developing inclusive immersive systems to increase accessibility. So this was a collaboration project between Aston Business School and the National Rail Network here in the UK and the National Health Services as well, just to build a virtual reality system that can help people with less visible impairments to better to make it easier for them to plan their journey on UK railway stations. So this is just a quick overview on my background. So for this particular paper that I'm presenting today, it actually follows on from a large body of work that the Digital Media Technology Lab has been working on for the past few years, which is mainly focused on assessing the usability and the accuracy of physical grasping of virtual objects and how accurate that can become in an exocentric augmented reality environment. Given that grasping is one of the most complex techniques that we use on a daily basis, and given that we're also really good at grasping physical objects, this kind of body of work really focuses, kind of better understands how well this form of physical grasping transfers to an exocentric augmented reality environment, which essentially means that the users are viewing their interaction from the outside using a monitor. In an exocentric augmented reality environment, we're not really using any wearable devices or any additional sensors. So this is specifically focused on environments where the use of wearable devices or additional sensors is not really feasible or not really desirable in this case. So the illustration just shows you what the environment that's just the environment that we used for this body of work in all the studies that we carried out. So the main thing that we found in our previous studies, or the 2 key problems that we found with grasping virtual objects, are inaccurate depth estimation. So we found that users either underestimate or overestimate the position of the virtual object in the z-axis, which was the biggest problem that we found. And then we also found inaccurate size estimation. Again, because of the lack of wearable devices or tactile feedback, inaccurate size estimation becomes a big problem in an exocentric environment. So this is where the drop shadows come in. So in this paper, we're actually assessing to see whether drop shadows can be useful, can be a useful additional visual cue for users to kind of mitigate the 2 key problems that we found in our previous studies. So just a quick overview on the study design. So for this specific study, we had 2 experiments with 30 users to quantify the accuracy of grasping in 2 conditions with drop shadows and without drop shadows. So the idea is that the users were presented with 27 different objects in across 3 Z planes. So this essentially means that each 9 positions were at a different distance, so 3 different distances away from the user, just to measure that accuracy along the Z-axis. So the users were presented with cubes and sphere in 27 different positions, and they were instructed to grasp the object. And then once they were happy with the accuracy of their grasp, they just verbally said that they were happy with the grasp. So the users are the ones that got to decide what an accurate grasp is in this case. The exocentric systems in this kind of research use Microsoft Kinect 2 sensor and the Sync Master feedback monitor, which is essentially just a large feedback monitor that the users use to get the feedback on their interactions. So the way we measure the accuracy of grasping, we use 2 key metrics here. The first one is the grasp aperture, which is actually a metric that that it's widely used for physical grasping as a measure for the hand opening, so how big the hand opening is and how stable a certain grasp is. It's essentially the distance between the index and the thumb fingers. We also use grasp displacement, which is kind of novel to this work. We couldn't just use grasp aperture in an exocentric augmented reality environment because grasp aperture needs tactile feedback in order to give you additional information other than the hand opening. So by just using grasp aperture, we didn't really have any position information regarding where the grasp is in relationship to the virtual object. So we use grasp displacement, which measures the grasp middle point by kind of getting the middle point between the palm and the grasp aperture middle point as well. And by finding out the grasp middle point, we can calculate the distance between the grasp middle point and the middle point of the virtual object. That way, using these 2 metrics, we have information regarding the size of the hand opening. So that's using the grasp aperture. And then we have information regarding the position of the grasp in relationship to the virtual object using the grasp displacement. We've also used task completion time because we found in earlier studies that using grasping in this kind of environment can sometimes be time consuming. And we wanted to see if drop shadows can help mitigate this problem or just speed up the process of the interaction tasks. We also focused on the usability of drop shadows. So we wanted to see how usable drop shadows would be as an additional visual cue to aid users to better use this natural form of interaction in augmented reality. So we used the system usability scale questionnaire to assess the usability of the drop shadows. And we also noted any kind of user observation in post-test questionnaires as well. So the key results from this assessment, we found that with the use of drop shadows, we were able to significantly reduce task completion time. This is shown in the box plot and on this slide. So just by giving users an additional visual cue, they were actually able to complete their interaction tasks much faster. They were able to form a rough idea of where the object was just by looking at the floor and at the shadow, even before any grasping interactions actually began. More importantly, we were also able to significantly improve this depth estimation problem that we had in previous studies when we compared the drop shadows conditions to the non-drop shadow condition. So this is what you see in the heat map at the bottom of the slide. So without the drop shadows, this is the grasp middle point that's shown in the red and blue in relationship to the virtual object. So as you can see, without the drop shadows, there's a lot of overestimation or underestimation of the position of the object. Once we added the drop shadows, the grasp middle point became much more clustered around the object. So users were more accurate in grasping the object with the in estimating the position of the object in the z-axis, sorry, with the use of the drop shadows. One thing that the drop shadows did not really improve is the size estimation using grasp aperture. This is something that we expected, again, because of the lack of tactile feedback. This kind of still remains a problem when using grasping in an exocentric augmented reality environment. In terms of the usability, we also found that drop shadows as an additional visual cue, the users labeled it as good and highly acceptable. So it is a usable additional visual cue that can be used to aid in interaction using this natural form of hand-based interactions. This rating was higher than the no drop shadows condition as well. So these were the main findings. I think this would be the last slide. So in terms of the future work and the future directions, we still have this problem of inaccurate size estimation using grasp aperture. So this is one of the problems that we want to further explore and see if there are any other solutions to this problem, especially in an exocentric augmented reality environment where you can't really use any wearable devices. We also want to investigate drop shadows for egocentric environments as well, and with wearable devices, because those could present their own set of problems with the limited field of view, and see how best drop shadows can be used in those different settings as well. And finally, for this specific paper, or for this specific body of work, really, we only assessed one grasp type, which is called the medium wrap grasp. And the reason for that is because it's based on the literature. It's the most used grasp type that we use on a daily basis in our daily tasks. So we also want to quantify the accuracy of other frequently used grasps that we use on a daily basis and see how well those translate to augmented reality as well. And I believe that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Great work. So again, the look into the audience. If somebody would like to ask something, please go ahead. As usual, the chair always has lots of questions, as you might know. Maybe you could enlighten us or kind of give us some hint about one thing. I was thinking, if you actually looked at this or have already like a hunch if that has any impact. If I rightfully understood you having these drop shadows, and then the user can estimate better the place they're grasping. And did you record the motion of the users? Because I would think that that motion parallax might be having an impact there.
That's a really good point, actually. But in this particular kind of research, so users were essentially static. They were not really instructed to move around the area. But you're right. I think especially the arm motion can play a big role in the kind of accuracy. So it's definitely something we could look into going forward. But for this particular research, they were instructed to stay static in their place while grasping different positions.
Great, thanks. Yeah, we have some questions from Discord. Maybe Mort can paste them in here.
Yeah.
We still have a bit of time for questions.
So one question says, how do you think the results could scale to other geometries? I'm assuming this is this referring to the object type? So we only used cubes and spheres in this research just to start with abstract shapes to begin with. But we are looking to move into more, I guess they're called complex objects, and see how that can impact the accuracy as well.
The shapes.
Do you anticipate the results?
Do you anticipate the results would change if you would use a head-worn display or a mobile AR system? From Stephanie.
Yeah, I think so, especially in the kind of the estimating the size of the virtual object, I think that might be better to do. It might be more accurate to do using a wearable device. I'm not sure how well the shadows would transfer to wearable devices, but that's something we're going to look into as well.
Okay, great. Right. So, the other panelists can also join into the questions, but I guess thank you now for more to have some justice to drop shadows in augmented reality, and we are heading over to more grasping, I guess. Thank you, Mahmoud. We are heading over to more grasping. Suzanne is grasping precisely, I guess, with different hand shapes, as I see here. And Suzanne is a PhD student at the Universidad Rey Juan Carlos in Madrid. And please go ahead and present your paper.
Thanks. Is it working? Do you see my screen?
Yes, works perfect.
Okay. Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Susan Sali, and I'm going to present to you our work, fine visual manipulation with hands of different sizes. So nowadays, thanks to a high degree of realism, VR is able to immerse us fully in virtual environments. And in order to achieve full immersion, the natural next step would be to be able to interact with subjects in these environments. However, this action is more complex than it seems because it implicitly involves hand tracking and hand object simulation, which are usually solved independently. So that creates challenges in connecting the two tasks, especially because the hand model using these two components may be different in terms of size and also morphology. So this is the reason that motivated our work. We would like to create VR animations of fine object manipulation that will be driven by interactive hand tracking with the user's hand. So the computation of skeletal configuration of hand models is at the core of both hand tracking and hand simulation. And these two lines of research differ in the input data and in the formulation of the computational problem, but both solve the pose of the hand. So let's first take a look at the hand tracking line. So modern methods of optical hand tracking can be classified into two large sets. So first, they are the generative methods, so which find the hand configuration that minimizes an objective function. They require a hand model, but no training step. And then we have the discriminative methods, which basically regress the hand configuration based on the input data. And the latter do require training step. Physics-based hand simulation, however, solve the pose of the hand with a wider range of methods. So first of all, it aims to compute a hand configuration that satisfies force equilibrium. And the computing forces are dominated by contact and joint constraints, but may also may also include soft tissue deformation. And among these approaches, we can find the articulated hand representation, geometric flesh skinning, local skin deformation at fingers, full flesh deformation, and lastly, the method presented by Vishfor that we use in our work and that I will introduce later. So the challenge faced here is to formulate a simpler optimization problem to connect both components in an easy way, while it allows us to use any type of tracking and hand simulation methods. So now I'm going to introduce two elements that we used in our work. So on one hand, we used a MANO, which is a data-driven low-dimensional parametric surface hand model, which is presented by Romero et al., built from 3D human scans performing a wide variety of hand poses. And it is able to represent highly realistically hand shapes in any pose. So it works as follows. One set of parameters describes the shape, while another set describes the pose of the hand. Then, on the other hand, we used CLAP, which is a freely available hand simulator presented by Vishfor et al., as I said before, and works as follows. On each simulation frame, all the bones of the simulated hand, the nodes of pictorial decomposition of the skin, and the position and the orientation of a grasp object of course varies, are computed jointly by solving an optimization like formulation of implicit integration of the deformation dynamics. The formulation of dynamics gathers multiple potential energy terms that models the physical behavior of the hand in its interaction with the grasp object, but also the command provided by the hand tracking. In practice, to set up the hand simulation, we first generate the wrist shape geometry of the hand surface and also the skeleton based on particular values of the shape parameters of the model that I presented earlier. And then we tutorialize the volume of the hand. We connect internal nodes of this tetroidal mesh to the bones. And finally, we pass all the simulation model to the client library. So now I'm going to introduce our method. So we used an intermediate hand representation to connect the user's tracked hand and the VR simulated hand. The latter is not constrained by other VR objects like the track hand, but shares the same size and morphology as the simulated hand. So first of all, we apply a uniform scale to the tracked hand such that it matches the overall size of the simulated hand. So we do this by fitting a bounding box to an appendant pose, and then, given a pose of the tracked hand, we compute the pose of the intermediate hand such that it retains the most relevant characteristics despite skeletal differences. And this is really important. So to do so, we define a set of features that will be used for solving the optimization problem. As we need the ability to manipulate small objects with high dexterity, what we did is to take a set of features, the concatenation of the fingertips position, and then we formulate the computation of the intermediate hand pose, such as the solution of a constrained optimization problem that would produce the features as close as possible to those of the tracked hand. Then we solve it iteratively using the Gauss-Newton method. And finally, on every simulation frame, once the pose of the intermediate hand is computing for the way the retargeting strategy described right earlier, we use it to command the simulation of the VR hand from CLAP. So in fact, the decomposition of the hand animation splits into two problems, as we said, the retargeting and the simulation. Actually, this process simplifies the overall approach and allows us to leverage all the share of simulation libraries and tracking methods. So then we wanted to evaluate the practical impact and see if our retargeting strategy had any effect on the dexterity of interaction. So to do so, we designed a user experiment in which the users had to execute a manipulation task that consisting of picking a cube with their thumb and index finger from a position A, move it to position B, and drop it there. So actually, two different strategies and manipulations were studied in this experiment. So on one hand, we compared our pose retargeting strategy, which is referred to as ours, with a naive retargeting strategy that we carried out by aligning the palms of the tracked hand and intermediate hand, and then we're directly copying the joint angles to the tracked hand. The tracked hand to the intermediate hand, which is referred to as naive in this case. And on the other hand, to study fine and gross manipulation, we respectively used a small 1 centimeter wide cube and another one bigger of 6 centimeters. So in each experimental trial, we asked the user to execute the cube manipulation task, testing both types of manipulation and under both strategy conditions, which amounts to 4 trials per block, and the order of these blocks were randomized. And then each block has been repeated 5 times in order to evaluate the learning effect. And for each experimental condition, we measured the time needed to complete the manipulation task. And moreover, for the last experimental block, we asked the participants to complete a questionnaire to assess their subjective feelings of dexterity, more particularly in terms of precision, ease, and naturalness. And finally, a total of 20 right-handed participants took part in the user study, and we asked them their age, hand size, and prior VR experience. So now let's take a look at the results. So the analysis of performance and self-reporting of the user experiment presents benefits of a pose retargeting strategy. And moreover, these benefits appear independent of hand size, VR experience, or age. And first and foremost, our strategy exhibits significantly better performance than the naive strategy for the fine manipulation. And in addition, as we can see, the naive strategy performs significantly worse on fine manipulation than on gross manipulation, while, as we can see, our strategy does not exhibit any significant performance difference on these two manipulation conditions. Besides, hand simulation has an effect on performance for fine manipulation regardless of the retargeting strategy, but our strategy performs better than the naive one consistently across hand sizes. We saw after that the fine manipulation benefits from learning more significantly than gross manipulation. Therefore, the analysis of task performance across repetitions indicates that the performance gain of our strategy is larger initially, which suggests that it is more natural, so in other words, that it requires less training. Finally, the questionnaire suggests that our post-retargeting strategy feels significantly more precise, easier, and more natural for fine manipulation. And to conclude, we proposed a method to retarget hand poses between hands with different size and morphology. The method serves for connecting off-the-shelf solution for hand tracking and physics-based hand simulation, while it avoids the need to share a common hand representation. The results of the user study indicate that our method is effective for fine manipulation, achieving performance and naturalness comparable to gross manipulation. And lastly, from an applied point of view, our hand retargeting approach could accelerate the development of a VR training applications that would require high dexterity and fine manipulation.
I guess.
Fine manipulation doesn't mean fast. And of course, our method also presents some drawbacks. So first, the retargeting method is applicable only to hands with similar skeletal topology, so with 5 fingers and 3 phalanxes. And our method also assumes that the shape of the simulated VR hand is given, which is the case in CLAP. And for example, as feature web, we could explore more diverse feature vectors, object and function. For example, we could include all the points in the hand or pose likelihood. We could also try to connect hands with very diverse skeletons with a different number of fingers or phalanxes. So the technical challenge will be to define relevant feature metrics for such diverse hands. So we thank the funding agency, all those who helped in this project. And last but not least, thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Suzanne. Great talk. So lots of information to sink in. I'm asking there's already some question from Maud.
Do you think that there is a threshold ratio in science with respect to objects, where your approach is better than the naive one?
We have to read for the people who maybe would just watch on YouTube. Sure. So Maud is asking, do you think that there is a threshold ratio, hand size compared to object size, where your approach is better than the naive one?
This is an interesting question. I think that, yeah, that could be, there could be a ratio. I don't have a precise measure actually, but I think that, for example, with the naive approach, we could measure like the hole that it's between the 2 fingers, and I think when the hand is pretty big, I think the threshold will be more important. If the user, for example, the users have a small hand, I think the ratio would be smaller. And I think it could depend also, yeah, of course, of the hand size and also the precision of the tracker method. Because for example, in our case, we use the lip motion, and this is quite gross, of course, actually. So even when you just try the application that comes with this, for the software that comes with the lip motion, the pinch action is quite imprecise, actually, not very accurate. So there are a lot of factors that could like make vary the threshold, but Yeah, there's definitely a threshold that could be set for this. I don't know if I answers well the question.
Yeah, I think it seems to be there's still some questions. Mort have a question?
Yeah, hi there. I just have a quick one. You mentioned you wanted to find more dexterous hand poses. So does that mean you're going to move away from the leap motion to kind of accommodate for those, or?
I think yes. Leap motion is simple to set up, etc. But our method runs actually with every type of tracking method, as long as there is the fingertips position tracked. That is to say. But yeah, when it's not in the future work, it's already the case because we implemented our methods such as, but in the way that you used an interface. So as long as you have the interface implemented, you can use any type of tracker, actually. And yeah, that would be great because leap motion sometimes is a bit
Thank you.
a bit inaccurate. That's it. Thanks for your question.
All right, great. Thank you, Suzanne, again for your
Thank you for all.
talk and also the quite insightful answers to the questions. We have our next panelist, Xiaolong Liu from Beihang University, and his topic is, wait, my cheat sheet is somewhere else. We are hearing about collaborative object manipulation. So please go ahead, Xiaolong Liu.
Okay, thank you for the introduction for me. Thank you. Is it working?
Yeah, everything fine. Great.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you for introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm Xiaolong Liu from Beihang University, Beijing, China. Our paper is VR collaborative object manipulation based on viewport quality. This work is together with Lili Wang, Xiangyu Li from Beihang University. Object manipulation is one of the most basic operations in VR applications. In complex tasks, multiple users, collaborative manipulation is superior to single user manipulation in terms of efficiency and accuracy. However, when multiple users manipulate an object, how to control the translation, rotation, and scale of the object to improve efficiency. There are some related works focused on how to determine the one or more users can manipulate objects in the current frame. In the left frame, Ledgers proposed to add an extra director to assign manipulation dominance to actors according to the views of the director. In the right video, Barrow used two conditions to determine the user's dominance to manipulate the object. One, at least one other user's permission is obtained before the user can select a handle of the object. After after the user manipulates the object, he must obtain the consent of all other users for the manipulation to be effective. The previous methods didn't consider the viewport quality of users, so the efficiency and accuracy still need to be improved. The challenge is how to determine the dominant based on viewport quality. Our method determines that the dominator for VR collaborative manipulation in real time by comparing viewport quality of multiple users. Here is the third view image for user A and B to manipulate the blue object to fit the green target. A is the current view N of user A. B is the current view N of user B. If B is the dominant of the last frame N-1, we calculate the viewport quality score of image B. A is the non-dominant of the last frame and -1. For A, after we calculate the last frame, calculate viewport quality score of image A, we compare the score of A and B. If the viewport quality score of user A is greater than user B, and the filter result is greater than or equal to 1, user A will be the dominant. In the next, we give the details of those three steps. In order to evaluate the viewport quality of users, we construct the viewport function, and it includes three components. The first one is the visibility of the object needs to be manipulated, which is the visible area of the object. The second one is the visibility of the target, which is the visible area of the target. The third one is the depth and distance combined factor of the target. In the preliminary experiment, we found that when the object approaches the target, and only minor adjustments were needed. At that time, the viewport quality of user A and user B are very similar. User A may manipulate the object for a time. The matching error cannot be effectively decreased. Now, it is better to switch the dominant position between the two users and perform alternate manipulations on the objects. So we add a time decay term, QFD, to reduce A's viewport quality score and give B the dominance. In the preliminary experiment, we also found that the high frequency switching of the dominance among multiple users affects the continuity of the manipulation. So we proposed two temporal filters to avoid the high frequency switching of dominance. This is the first filter whose length is I. In our implementation, I is 100 for each user. If it has the highest viewport quality in a frame, we set its flag to 1. Otherwise, the flag is set to 0. After the non-dominant user with the highest viewport quality is determined in frame N, we get its flag of frame N minus I plus 1 to N and generate a comparison sequence. If the filter result is greater than 1, it means the user has the highest viewport quality in at least M consecutive iframes, and we set it to the dominant manipulator. This is the second filter whose length is I. The number of the zero in this filter is I minus K. If the result of the second filter is 1, it means this user starts to have the best viewport quality for K frames. So we set him as the dominant manipulate. We first designed the port use study to evaluate the effectiveness of our viewport quality evaluation function. The task of the port use study is to require participants to manipulate the object to the target position. The image marked with a check mark is the best view selected by user, and the image marked in the gray frame is the view with a high score calculated with our viewport quality evaluation function. The accuracy rate in our viewport quality evaluation function is 99%, which indicates that our evaluation function is effective. We designed a user study with 3 tasks to evaluate our method. There are 5 control conditions and an experimental condition with our method. EC is with our method. CC1 is with the first come first manipulate. CC2 is with the last come first manipulate. CC3 is with the active switching dominance. CC4 is with the active switching dominance after we in the dominant viewers. CC5 is with the third direct to assign the dominance. In the first task, two participants are required to manipulate the cube, the accurate pyramid, and the G-port or the table to the target position collaboratively. In the second task, two participants are required to manipulate the bunny in the box to the target position collaboratively. In the third task, two participants are required to manipulate the piece of blue pipe to the target position collaboratively. Task performance was measured with the following objective metrics: computation time, rotation error, and position error, and scale error. This table shows AC had significantly less computation time and rotation error in 3 tasks. The position error and the scale error are similar to control conditions in 3 tasks. The left figure shows the user participation of all conditions for 3 tasks for T1, T2, T3, compared with CC1, CC2, CC3, CC4. The user participation of AC is significantly improved. The right figure shows the result of task load. Compared with all control conditions, the task load of our method is reduced significantly. In order to investigate the influence of time decay or manipulation, we conduct a comparative experiment between our method with the time decay and without time decay. The table shows that our method with the time decay had made significant improvements in the reduction of rotation error, position error, as well as increase in participation, and effect size ranges from large to very large. In conclusion, we proposed a method to automatically determine the dominant of VR collaborative object manipulation. Our method improves the efficiency and accuracy of VR collaborative object manipulation and makes the task load smaller. There are some limitations of our method. The first limitation is that the processed viewport quality factors does not consider the appearance details or geometry details of the surface of the manipulated object. The second limitation is that our method is suitable for 2 or more collaborators, but we didn't test more collaborators in each group in the use study. There are some user work, some future work. One future work is to use a more refined method to determine the dominance for different types of manipulation, which can further improve efficiency. Another possible future work is to use the viewport quality to switch dominance and guide the user's navigation pace, which may improve the efficiency and accuracy of manipulation. That's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Xiaolong. Great. So some questions. We have quite a bit of time for questions. Maud is asking, have you tried to use your approach in a scene with moving objects?
Thank you for your question. In our experiment, the objects at the targets are static, but our method is the real-time method. It can be used for dynamic scales. We will try this later. Thank you. Yeah.
Great. Any other questions? Maybe also from our audience?
Yeah.
I have also a question. As the chair, I can jump ahead the queue. And what kind of visual are you providing any visual feedback regarding the dominance in the setup? You know, like you have, I don't want to say fighting, but you have like people competing for working on something. Do you have a feedback who is now really in charge, or is that yeah?
So sorry, I can't. You mean our method to use some scale to improve the efficiency and accuracy? This is the question.
Now it's about the. I was wondering about the visual feedback. Visual feedback. If you can,
visual feedback.
Yeah, if there's a visual feedback, who is now actually the dominant participator in the manipulation of the object?
Yes. Well, we give the virtual feedback. And the red line means the dominance. The green line means the non-dominance. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right. Maybe one more little question. I think we can just go ahead to the next panelist. Thank you, Xiaolong. Maybe we have some more questions later, or hopefully we have still some time left. Right, and I think, yes, Jonathan is our next panelist. Jonathan is a PhD student at the Human Computer Interaction Group in University of Constance, and he is working on, let me quickly cheat here and look at my notes, separation, compositing, or hybrid, with a question mark. I guess you're giving some answers now. Go ahead, please, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. I hope you can see my slides.
Yes, all working.
If this is the case, then I will start. And as already said, my name is Jonathan Wieland. I'm a member of the Human Computer Interaction Group at the University of Constance. And one of our research topics is interaction in augmented reality with handheld devices and mixed reality collaboration in general. And today I'm very glad to present to you our paper with the title Separation, Composition, or Hybrid, comparing collaborative 3D object manipulation techniques for handheld augmented reality. Yeah, and I do this on behalf of my co-authors, who are Johannes Zagermann, Jens Müller, and Harald Reiterer. We want to dive into the topic with some video footage showing IKEA's AR furnishing app Place that motivates our work very well. So by using this handheld AR app, IKEA's customers can get an idea whether the furniture they maybe want to buy will fit in their homes, and additionally they can also try it out easily at different locations. And as shown in the video, this involves rotating and moving virtual objects through one's home. Yeah, but given the fact that furnishing a place is a task that people often do collaboratively, it's quite astonishing that IKEA's app is only a single user application. And this is also the reason, or the reason for that may be the conflict that arises if two or even more users want to manipulate the same object at the same time. So as long as only one person manipulates an object, of course, there's no problem. The inputs can be directly applied. But what happens if a second user also wants to manipulate the same object at the same time? How do you then combine users' actions that may have even different directions or magnitudes? Yeah, and from our literature research, we derived 3 different techniques to solve this conflict. And these techniques are separation, composition, and hybrid. And with these techniques, we implemented a collaborative variant of IKEA's AR furnishing app, and then used this app to compare the 3 techniques in a user study. Yeah, and on the following slides, I will now shortly explain our techniques. The first one, separation, solves the conflict by separating the manipulation task's rotation and positioning between the users. So this means while one user rotates the object, the other one can only position it. And of course, this also works then simultaneously, since users are manipulating mutually exclusive degrees of freedom of the object. Our second technique, composition, only allows users to perform the same manipulation task simultaneously. And then a merge policy, in our case, the sum, is used to combine their inputs. So if both users, for example, move the object by 20 centimeters into the same direction, this then results with the sum as merge policy in a movement by 40 centimeters into that direction. This also works if users move the object towards different directions. So in the example on the slide, the user in blue moves the object by 40 centimeters towards the Z direction, and the user in red by the same distance towards the X direction. And using the sum as the merge policy, this results in a movement of 57 centimeters towards the diagonal. Yeah, here another example for rotations. So if the user in blue rotates the object by 45 degrees counterclockwise, and the user in red by 20 degrees clockwise, this results in a counterclockwise rotation of 25 degrees. Our third technique, hybrid, is basically the combination of the other two techniques. Here users can perform any manipulation task at any time, and depending on their inputs, the app switches between the other two approaches. So if both perform the same manipulation task, in this case rotation, composition is used. And if they perform different manipulation tasks, then of course separation is used. Yeah, we investigated these three techniques for handheld AR devices, since they are the most prevalent AR devices to date. And also most of the related work focused on different device classes. So for example, the work by Aguresh et al., which investigated projection-based virtual environments, as you can see in the images on the left. And additionally, our analysis of related work also revealed partly contrasting results. So while Aguresh et al. Conclude that users are more accurate with their implementation of composition than with their implementation of separation, Grundy et al. Report that for their implementation of hybrid, the technique's accuracy increased with users' specialization on different manipulation tasks. And of course, this eventually corresponds to separation, and therefore is in contrast with the results by Aguresh. Yeah, with our work, we therefore wanted to answer the question, which of the three techniques the handheld AR application should use to enable users to collaboratively furnish a room with digital furniture. Yeah, and to answer this question, we conducted a controlled lab experiment during which we tasked dyads to collaboratively furnish one of our labs with 7 virtual pieces of furniture. And as you can see in the video, the participants did this as a docking task, since the target positions and rotations of the pieces of furniture were predefined by the yellow virtual masking tape on the floor. Yeah, for our study, we recruited 48 participants, which means we had 24 dyads. And since we recruited participants directly as dyads, the members of each dyad already knew each other before the study. The participants were mainly students from different disciplines and between 18 and 40 years old. We decided on a within subjects design, which means that each dyad worked with all 3 techniques in a counterbalanced order. For each technique, participants had a short training phase and then completed the actual task twice. Yeah, we decided for these 2 consecutive passes per technique to identify intended learning effects within each condition. For the study, we subdivided our general research question into 3 more specific ones. So at first, performance. How do the techniques differ in accuracy and task completion time? And we operationalized this question over position error, rotation error, and task completion time. Yeah, second, workload. How do the techniques differ in subjectively perceived workload? Here we use the NASA TLX to measure subjective workload. Third, participation. How do the techniques relate with users' participation? And to operationalize this question, we calculated the participation score as proposed by related work. And finally, user experience. Which technique do users prefer? Here we let the participants rank the conditions, perform the concluding interview, and additionally use the user experience questionnaire. And structured by the research questions, I will now shortly summarize the findings of our experiment. And thereby I won't detail on position and rotation error and on the participation scores, since there were no significant differences between the techniques for these measures. And due to time restrictions, I will also leave out the results of the UAQ, since they are well reflected in the subjective ranking and the statements we collected in the concluding interview. Yeah, let's start with the findings related to the performance of the three techniques. And here, for the first pass, task completion times for separation and hybrid were significantly lower than for composition. This slightly changed in the second pass. Here, participants still were significantly faster with separation compared to composition. However, we were not able to find a significant difference between hybrid and composition. An explanation for that can be found when we compare the passes with each other. And here it showed that for separation and composition, participants were significantly faster in the second pass, which means that there was no learning effect for hybrid between the passes. Yeah, next we'll have a look at the findings of the NASA TLX, which we use to operationalize the technique's workload. And here participants perceived significantly less workload with separation compared to composition. Yeah, finally, let's have a look at the findings for user experience. Here on the slide, we have the results of the subjective ranking. And as you can see, participants ranked separation and hybrid significantly better than composition. This ranking, of course, was also reflected in participants' statements during the concluding interview. Here we have an overview of the advantages and disadvantages they mentioned. And for the condition separation, participants mainly valued the clear division of work. But on the other hand, also said that this work division restricted them in their freedom of action. Regarding composition, participants mainly complained about the sum as merge policy, which caused unpredictable target overshooting during the task. And for hybrid, participants positively mentioned the freedom of action this technique provides. However, they also said that this freedom of action entailed the possibility of hindering each other during the task. Yeah, summarizing, we can say that the results do not speak clearly in favor of one condition. So regarding task completion time and subjective workload, the study results suggest using separation, since participants performed better while perceiving less workload with this technique. However, participants' preferences were polarized between separation's clear division of work and hybrid's freedom of action. And with that, our findings imply choosing the approach depending on scenario and task. So if time is the decisive factor, we suggest using separation. If the focus lies on user experience, we suggest using hybrid. Yeah, and with this, I would like to end my talk, and I'm happy to answer your questions now.
Thank you, Jonathan, for your presentation, talk, and insight into collaborative manipulation. So are there any questions from the audience? Well, maybe I just just ask one little question in between. Maybe somebody's still writing. Jonathan, did you notice any, or did you, while you're doing this user study, did you allow the participants to use verbal communication, because they're standing in the same place, and obviously they can use verbal communication to coordinate their approach. Did you have some restrictions for them, or just was there they had to be silent to work on some tasks?
Yeah, it's a good question. So our participants had no restrictions regarding communication, so they could speak freely with each other during the whole task. But it was quite interesting that we had some groups that talked very, very much, and they were very communicative. But we had also other groups that didn't say a word during the whole task, and it also worked. So this was quite interesting also for me, but we didn't evaluate it further. So this is also something one could do in future work. Yeah. So
yeah, great, good, thank you. So we have one. There is a question. Would it be possible to use a different approach depending on the manipulated object and or the task?
Yeah, I think this question aims a little bit for the merge policies. So we use the sum as merge policy, but of course there are also other merge policies. And I think there are, future work should further investigate these merge policies, and maybe then you can get such results that for some tasks or for some objects you need another merge policy than for other tasks. And I think this is also very interesting, and also something that we should investigate in future work.
Yeah, would this be something you would make like a modal change in the user interface, or would this be task dependent? What's your hunch there?
It's a good question. I think I haven't enough insights to answer that perfectly, but yeah, I think it could be both. So it could be a modal, but it could also be dynamically, maybe also change during the task. So it could be also related to users' positions in the room, or to users' viewports on the objects. I think that it could be influenced by a lot of factors.
Yeah, great. We have one more question. Maybe we can squeeze this in very quickly from Wei Shuo Lu. Nice work. I was wondering how to generalize the results to AI HMD. So like wondering what would be an impact. Do you have some insight there?
Yeah, also a good question. Thanks for the question. Well, I think we can't generalize it, because for HMDs you typically have other inputs modalities.
Yeah.
So here we have a touch screen, and with a HMD you typically have a controller, and you also interact differently with the 3D objects. So I think this is something we also should investigate for this device class.
Yeah. Actually, Wei Shuo Lu actually preempted a little bit. He also was talking about controllers and so on. I just can't.
I see. Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that is it's a different class of interactions then.
But actually, I like the idea of using mobile devices as controller. So to combine both device classes. I think this is also a very promising approach also for different areas. So these hybrid interfaces, are very interesting, I think.
Yeah. Great, thanks. So I think thanks again to Jonathan, and we heading over to our next panelist in our session today, which is Ronke Shi, and Ronke, maybe you can already
He.
Oh yeah, there's something wrong here, but anyway, from Jiatong Liverpool University Suzhou in China, and he's a PhD there at the Department of Computing, and this talk will be about head-based mode switching in virtual reality. So after lots of AR, we're heading over to some VR issues there. Please.
Yeah, thank you
Go
for the
ahead.
introduction. So may I ask, can you see the screen?
Fortunately, we have a black screen. Anybody having not a black screen?
Yeah, let me try again. What about now?
No, black. Other participants also shaking head. No, seems not working.
Oh, okay. Let me try again here. Okay, what about now?
Nope. Oh, it's the web client, I guess. Some security setting in the browser.
So actually, from my side, I'm actually sharing the screen, the full screen of my PowerPoint. So what about others? Can you see the screen?
No, we're still having a black screen. Maybe you can just share the screen of PowerPoint, regardless if it's now full screen or whatsoever.
Yeah, this is actually what I've done just now. Yeah, I shared again now.
Yeah, because when you cancel it, it will block. When you cancel a sharing before, it will then later on block. Maybe you could try to see if there's usually like the camera or something is read out in Firefox or in Chrome. I don't know really.
Why? So now I quit, right? And then I share again. I shared again. So what about now?
Nope.
What about now?
Nope.
So I have tried to share the full screen and also the PowerPoint.
I think that's not gonna work. Maybe you could bootstrap the whole thing and log out, log in again through the link you received from.
Okay. Let me have a try.
Or share the video. Somebody has. There he. We try. Let's see. Maybe I can. Some information about for all the YouTube viewers. There will be after the session discussion with the authors on GatherTown. The link is in the program description. So it would be great if you have some further questions regarding the things in these talks, and then you can find our authors or presenters there to talk with you. All right, let's try again. Whoop.
Yeah. What about now?
Here we go. Yes, we can see something.
Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
The usual thing.
Okay.
Let's go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and sorry about the issue.
No worries.
So I'm Rong Kai from Xi'an Jiaotong Liupu University, and I'm glad to present our work exploring height-based mode switching in virtual reality. This work is done with my co-authors, Nan Zhu and Hailing Liang from Xi'an Jiao Tong Liupu University, and Shengdong Zhao from National University of Singapore. Right. Mode switching supports multi-level operations using a limited number of input methods. For example, here shown in the video, a 3D painting application can contain several modes for interacting with it, such as painting and erasing. Another example can be in a 3D modeling application, where interaction can involve different types of manipulation. Right, each of them have different effect from the same input. Right, the existing research focus on hand-based interaction for mode switching in VR. So, however, hand-based mode switching techniques may not be suitable or ideal for some cases. For example, when users need to use both of their hands to manipulate something, which is actually quite common in virtual reality and in some applications. So as such, a hands-free interaction approach can be helpful to provide a smooth and continuous flow of interaction. Head-based gestures can be a natural and cost-effective way for doing this. Thus, we investigate what potential head gestures can be used for mode switching in VR to provide the better user performance and usability, and how they would perform in a real application. Inspired by prior work, we have 3 design criteria to narrow the scope of the head gestures. So they were derived from literature and real use case. The first one is user maintainable. The action should be user maintained so that users can maintain the awareness of the system states, which can potentially reduce the system errors and mode errors. And the second is simple and fast. The mode switching actions should be simple, straightforward, and fast, so that it is possible for participants or users to perform simultaneously and seamlessly with the existing tasks. And the third criteria is independent. The mode switching action should be independent from the previous tracking states and should not rely on time-based actions. This actually guarantees an explicit transition between the modes during the mode switching. Based on this, we derived 8 head gestures. So the first 2 are move forward and backward, and then pitch up and down. Yeah, left and right, and then roll left and right. Okay, so we conduct our first study for feasibility evaluation. Our research question is which head gestures can lead to better user performance and feedback in VR-HMD mode switching tasks. As shown, a dual-hand line drawing task was used, and we followed a proven subtraction method from prior research outside of VR. Users need to use both of their hands to draw inward or outward lines with 2 colors in each horizontal group. They can directly draw blue lines and need to perform head gestures to switch the mode and then draw the right lines. So we have 2 different types of blocks, baseline blocks and also compound blocks. For baseline blocks, both have 10 trails and 5 for each direction. For a baseline block, users only need to draw unmodded blue lines, while for a compound block, they need to draw blue lines, the unmodded blue lines, and then right lines. They alternate. Okay, so in total we have 9 blocks, and the first 2 are for training, and the remaining 7 are used for analysis. So now I briefly explain the theory of subtraction method. I used an example of outward trails in a compound block. Okay, so for the first group of spheres, participants just draw the blue lines, and we call this the first cycle. immediately after the second cycle starts. And it ends when finishing the third groups of spheres. And this is the second cycle. And the remaining two groups are in the third cycle. So we call the second cycle and third cycle full cycles. For inward trails, they are the same. And then we can calculate the average full cycle duration for a block. So based on the subtraction method and our experimental design, we can get 3 mode switching times per participant per gesture. So the mode switching time is calculated by subtracting the average full duration of 2 adjacent baseline blocks from the average full cycle duration of a compound block. Aside from this, we also measured error rates for each gesture and collected subjective feedback from participants. In total, we have 560 trails for analysis from 16 participants, and we used within subject design, and the factor is head gestures. Right, so in terms of mode switching time, we actually did not find any significant difference. The time cost for performing mode switching of using each head gestures were similar. All the 8 head gestures are filtered from design criteria. They are all one-fold and simple to perform. So actually, our result proved that these gestures actually meet the design criteria. This is the distribution of error rate. As shown, is actually we received high-end error rates regardless of head gestures compared to prior work. Prior VR mode switching work, especially. So we think the possible reason is that the dual hand line drawing task was more challenging than the one hand task. Our setting actually represents an extreme situation where users' both hands are occupied. So for such case, an advantage of using head gesture is that it is hands-free and it does not rely on any other tracking devices. Okay, so talking back to the error rate, move forward and move backward had significantly low end error rates, and actually their overall error rate is also significantly low. And row left and right also had significant low error rates compared to the remaining 4. So in terms of subjective feedback, these 4 highlighted head gestures also received better user rankings and ratings. So our empirical comparison in study 1 points to 4 most suitable head gestures for mode switching in VR HMD. They are move forward, move backward, and row left, row right. So with the initial insights from study 1, we further use a 3D painting application to test these 4 head gestures. Because it is actually involved omni and multi-directional line drawing and locomotion. So the aim is to assess these head gestures in a real VR application and test their applicability and integration in a natural and representative task. Right, so we integrated the 4 head gestures into TubeBrush, an open source 3D painting application. So we use these 4 head gestures for 2 switching processes. One is for switching between pen and eraser, and another one is between pen and straight edge. So we actually offered participants an opportunity to customize their own settings, which means they can choose their preferred gestures for each of the switching process. Okay. So after they experienced our version and the original non-modified version, we collected subjective feedback from them, including the ratings on user experience questionnaire and the comments on both versions. So our results indicated that using head gestures to support mode switching in the VR drawing application provides a better user experience. Based on the results from 2 studies, we distill the following design recommendations. First, head gestures can support mode switching in VR. Incorporating head gestures in VR provides a smooth and continuous experience. And given that the head gestures can be detected effectively and can be performed easily, so we believe head gestures can support mode switching in VR. It can complement other modalities or tasks. And the second recommendation is that head gestures should be customized by end users. We actually received positive feedback from participants about customizing their preferred gestures for mode switching from the second study. Therefore, allowing users to customize their preferred gestures for mode switching could improve the learnability and also usability. And the last recommendation is that selecting suitable head gestures according to the use case. Designers should consider the unique features of head gestures and think about how they would affect the user experience in a specific application. So in summary, this work, we explored the use of 8 head gestures, and we conduct our first study to systematically compare the efficiency, accuracy, and usability in a controlled experiment. And then we further assess the 4 outperformed gestures in a real application. So based on the results, we conclude that head gestures can be used for mode switching in VR HMD and provides a hands-free and accurate, fast and low-cost experience. Right, thank you. That's all for my presentation. So do you have any questions?
Thank you. You really precisely in time. Any short question? We're already a little bit in the overall session, a little bit late as usual. Any question from the audience? Bruce Thomas is asking, which were the most comfortable head gestures? Some of these head movements are not normal neck movements.
Yeah, actually, indeed, some of the head gestures, I mean, some users do say that it's not that comfortable when doing it repeatedly. So actually, in the second study, when they don't need to do it repeatedly, they said it's okay. Actually, the most comfortable two are move forward and backward. This one and this one. So they are the two most comfortable head gestures. We actually have a questionnaire for this about the comfortability, and based on the ratings, these two are the most comfortable head gestures.
Great, thanks. So, any further questions then? Maybe we can have some final thoughts. Thank you, Wonke, for your presentation.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts from the panelists you would like to share? Because there's there's somebody in Zoom is asking another question to Wonke. Have you considered switching properties of a particular object rather than independent switches?
Sorry, what do you mean by a particular object switch properties of a particular object?
Maybe Becky can.
Oh, I guess you are saying not switching from user side or switching from object side. Am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, I don't. Like he needs to. I also can't really change for rotate object to translate object. She's asking.
Actually, this project is actually focusing on the possibility of using head gestures for mode switching. So it's actually not about the task. So for our case, we use the proven method. So it's about line drawing. So we believe head gestures could be applied for other applications, and it definitely can be used for rotate object and translate object. Yeah, I think it would work. Yeah, I hope this is what you want. Yeah.
And one last one. One quick, maybe you can quickly answer cyber sickness. Regarding
Cyber sickness?
gestures. Yeah.
Actually, in the real use case, we actually don't have so many mode switchings, which means, for example, you are drawing and then you have a quick switch to eraser, and it's just a quick performance of the gesture. So it actually won't involve much cyber sickness.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. So, dear panelists, authors and presenters, thank you very much for your great talks and presentations. And yes, and there is yet another, or again, an invitation to all of you to also join the GatherTown virtual coffee break and mingle and discuss some more regarding your work with the rest of the attendees of ISMA. All right, thank you very much, and hope to see you maybe next time in real